The massive holographic screens floating above Caraxes' capital city flickered to life, displaying High Commander Azara's towering figure. Her purple skin gleamed under the twin suns, and her silver armor reflected light like a mirror. She stood 7 feet tall, as did most of her warrior race, with muscles that could bend steel and eyes that glowed with ancient power. "Hear me, peoples of the eastern sector," her voice boomed across 1,000 worlds. "The Valkyrie Coalition grows tired of weaklings polluting our space with their presence. For 10,000 years, we have been the strongest force in this sector. Today, we offer you all a chance to prove yourselves worthy of standing beside us." In the grand hall below the broadcast center, hundreds of Caraxian warrior women stood at attention. Their ceremonial armor clicked as they shifted, excitement building in their ranks. They had watched countless races try to prove themselves over the centuries. All had failed. High Commander Azara raised her ceremonial warhammer, its head glowing with energy. "We challenge any race who claims to be our equal. Send your best warriors to Caraxes. Defeat our champions in ritual combat, and you shall have equal standing in our alliance. Fail, and submit to our rule, as is proper for the weak." The message repeated across space, translated into hundreds of languages. Most alien races immediately sent messages of submission or polite refusal. They had seen what happened to the last race that accepted the challenge. The proud Zenthians now served as laborers across Caraxian space. But in a small conference room on Earth's orbital defense station Alpha, things were different. Admiral James Chen rubbed his temples as he rewatched the broadcast for the 5th time. Around the table sat Earth's top military leaders, all looking thoughtful. "They're baiting us," General Sarah Rodriguez said, leaning forward. "They've noticed our expansion into their sector. This is their way of either forcing us out or making us submit without a full-scale war. The Caraxians are known for their honor." Admiral Chen replied, "If we win their challenge, they'll keep their word. The question is, can we win?" Captain Lai Wei, head of special operations, had been quiet until now. He pulled up holographic data showing Caraxian biology. "Their average soldier is twice as strong as our strongest athletes. Their skin can resist small arms fire. They've evolved on a high-gravity world and can fight for days without rest." He paused, then smiled. "But they're predictable. They've relied on brute force for so long, they'd forgotten there are other ways to fight." "What are you suggesting, Captain?" Admiral Chen asked. "Send my team. Not our biggest or strongest. Send our smartest combat specialists. I have a former ballet dancer who's undefeated in zero-G combat. A tiny woman who's mastered 5 martial arts. A strategist who can predict enemy moves before they make them." Lee's eyes sparkled. "The Caraxians expect us to match strength with strength. Let's show them why that's a mistake." Admiral Chen looked around the table. One by one, the other leaders nodded. He stood up and walked to the communication console. With a deep breath, he pressed the broadcast button. "High Commander Azara, this is Admiral James Chen of the United Space Command. On behalf of Earth and humanity, we accept your challenge. Expect our warriors within 1 standard month." As he ended the transmission, the room erupted in activity. They had much to prepare, and failure wasn't an option. But as Captain Lai began pulling up personnel files for his proposed team, he couldn't help but smile. The Caraxians had no idea what they were about to face. In her throne room on Caraxes, High Commander Azara received Earth's response with amusement. "Humans," she mused, running a finger along her warhammer's handle. "Such fragile creatures. This should be entertaining, at least." She had no way of knowing that her entire world was about to change forever. The massive Caraxian landing pad buzzed with activity as the human transport ship touched down. Thousands of warrior women had gathered to see their challengers, their armor gleaming under the harsh light of the twin suns. Many had brought their ceremonial weapons, expecting to be impressed by the size and strength of Earth's champions. What emerged from the ship left them speechless, but not in the way they had expected. Captain Sarah Chen walked down the ramp first. She stood only 5'4", with a lean build that made her look more like a dancer than a warrior. Behind her came James Martinez, tall but slim, moving with unusual grace. The rest of the team followed. 6 more humans, none of them matching the massive builds of the Caraxian warriors. "This is a joke," one of the Caraxian officers spat out, her voice carrying across the landing pad. "They send children to face us." High Commander Azara stepped forward, towering over Captain Chen. Her purple skin seemed to darken with anger. "Earth sends this as their best. You insult us with your presence." Chen looked up at the alien commander, her face calm. "With respect, Commander, size isn't everything. We're here to compete, not to match your appearance." Martinez stepped forward and bowed formally. "Perhaps a demonstration would help ease your concerns." His voice was soft but confident. The gathered warriors laughed, the sound echoing off the metal walls of the spaceport. One of them, a particularly large soldier named Kira, stepped into the open space of the landing pad. "Yes, little human. Show us what you can do." High Commander Azura raised her hand for silence. "Very well. Kira will give you a friendly demonstration of Caraxian combat prowess." Her smile showed she expected this to end quickly and painfully. Martinez removed his jacket, revealing simple athletic wear underneath. The Caraxians laughed harder. They could see no muscles like theirs, no obvious signs of strength. Kira cracked her knuckles and moved forward, her 7-foot frame casting a shadow over Martinez. What happened next stunned the entire crowd into silence. Kira charged forward with incredible speed, but Martinez moved like water. He stepped aside at the last moment, using Kira's own momentum to send her stumbling past him. Before she could recover, he had already moved to a new position, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. The Caraxian warrior spun around, angry now. She threw a punch that could bend steel, but hit only air as Martinez ducked under it, slipped past her guard, and with movements that seemed to defy gravity, used Kira's own weight to flip her onto her back. The impact shook the landing pad. Dead silence fell over the crowd. Captain Chen helped Kira up, who stood looking confused and embarrassed. "That's impossible," she muttered. "You're not even using strength." "We use what we have," Chen explained calmly. "Humans had to learn different ways to fight because we don't have your natural advantages. It's made us creative." High Commander Azara's eyes narrowed as she studied the human team with new interest. "Perhaps this will be more interesting than I thought." She gestured to her guards. "Show our guests to their quarters. The real trials begin tomorrow." As the human team was led away, whispers spread through the Caraxian crowd. They had expected to be impressed by raw power, but instead found themselves puzzled by this new approach to combat. Some scoffed, claiming it was mere trickery. Others weren't so sure. In their private chamber later, Martinez looked at Chen. "They still don't believe we can win." Chen smiled slightly as she unpacked her gear. "Good. The best victories are the ones nobody sees coming." She pulled out a tablet showing detailed analyses of Caraxian fighting styles. "Time to prepare for tomorrow. We're about to show them what humans can really do." The great combat arena of Caraxis roared with the sounds of thousands of warrior women. Sunlight streamed through the crystal dome above, making their silver armor sparkle. Today marked the beginning of the official trials, and the atmosphere crackled with excitement. High Commander Azara sat on her elevated throne, watching as her first champion stepped into the ring. Vorka was famous across 3 star systems for her fighting skills. She stood 8 feet tall, her muscles rippling under her purple skin as she raised her arms to the crowd. "Choose your first warrior," Azara called to the human team. Captain Chen nodded to James Martinez. He stepped forward, looking almost delicate next to the massive alien warrior. The crowd's laughter echoed through the arena. Vorka grinned, showing her sharp teeth. "I will try not to break you too quickly, little human." Martinez just smiled and took his starting position. The signal horn blared. Vorka charged forward like a freight train, her footsteps shaking the arena floor. Martinez waited until the last possible second, then moved. But instead of dodging, he stepped into her charge. The crowd gasped. It looked like suicide. At the last moment, Martinez dropped and spun, using Vorka's momentum against her. His movement was so smooth it looked like a dance. The massive warrior went flying over his shoulder, crashing into the ground with enough force to crack the floor. The arena fell silent. Vorka jumped up, rage in her eyes. She threw punch after punch, each blow powerful enough to shatter concrete. But Martinez moved like smoke between her strikes, never where her fists landed. He twisted, turned, and flowed around her attacks, making the huge warrior look slow and clumsy. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Vorka's movements became slower, her breathing heavy. Sweat poured down her purple skin. Martinez hadn't even thrown a single punch. He simply kept moving, letting her tire herself out. Finally, he struck. A series of quick hits to pressure points that Captain Chen had identified in their research. Vorka's legs buckled, and she fell to her knees, gasping. "Submit," Martinez said quietly. "You fought well, but you can barely stand." The proud warrior looked up at him, confusion and exhaustion in her eyes. I submit," she managed to say. The silence in the arena was deafening. Next came Captain Chen's match against Dura, a warrior famous for her speed. But Chen's Krav Maga techniques shocked everyone. She didn't try to match Dura's speed or strength. Instead, she turned every attack against her opponent, using quick, efficient movements that ended fights before they really began. "Impossible," High Commander Azara muttered from her throne as she watched Dura fall. "They're not even using powered armor or strength enhancers." By the end of the day, the humans had won 3 matches. The Kyraxian warriors had never seen anything like it. Their traditional fighting style, based on overwhelming force and endurance, seemed to fail against these strange new techniques. In the competitors' ready room, Chen looked at her team. "Good work today. But tomorrow will be harder. They'll start adapting to our style." Martinez nodded as he applied cooling packs to his bruises. Even perfect technique couldn't completely protect against the aliens' incredible strength. "Then we'll show them something new. Humans are good at that." High Commander Azara sat alone in her chamber that night, watching recordings of the day's matches. For the first time in centuries, she felt something she hadn't expected: doubt. These humans weren't fighting like any species they'd encountered before. And somehow, that made them more dangerous than any challenger they'd ever faced. 3 days into the tournament, High Commander Azara called an emergency meeting with her top warriors. The massive war room, filled with battle trophies from 1,000 victories, felt less impressive than usual. "They're studying us," Kira said, rubbing her still sore shoulder from her loss to Martinez. She pointed to the holographic replay floating above the table. "Look how they analyze every move we make." The replay showed Captain Chen facing off against one of their strongest warriors. Unlike previous matches, Chen was being aggressive, striking at specific points on her opponent's body. Each hit seemed carefully planned. "They found weak points in our natural armor," another warrior growled. "Spots where our nerve clusters are closest to the surface. But that knowledge is not in any database. They learned it by watching our earlier matches." Azara's face darkened. "They adapt too quickly. Each human fighter uses different techniques, and they change their strategy every match." She slammed her fist on the table, leaving a dent in the metal. "We must do something." Meanwhile, in the human quarters, Captain Chen's team was having their own meeting. The room was filled with holographic displays showing Kyraxian combat moves, with data scrolling alongside each image. "They're starting to adjust to our defensive techniques," Martinez said, holding an ice pack to his ribs. "Even a glancing blow from a Kyraxian could cause serious damage. Yesterday's opponent almost caught me with that new combination move." Chen nodded, cycling through more combat footage. "They're learning. But so are we." She pointed to a particular sequence. See how they always plant their back foot before a power strike, and how their shoulder plates shift just before a grab attempt. We can use that. Lisa Wong, their combat analyst, spoke up from where she sat cross-legged on her bed. I've noticed something else. They fight as individuals, not as a team. Each warrior wants personal glory. We can use that too. Back in the arena that afternoon, the crowds watched in growing frustration as another Caraxian champion fell. This time, it was Wong herself who fought, a woman even smaller than Chen. But she had turned the fight into a chess match, predicting her opponent's moves and countering them before they happened. How? The defeated warrior asked, still trying to catch her breath. How did you know what I would do? Wong helped her up, showing respect that surprised the watching crowd. You telegraph your moves. All that strength means nothing if your opponent knows what's coming. In the royal box, Azara overheard the exchange. For the first time in her long life, she felt something close to fear. Not of the human strength, they had none worth mentioning, but of their minds. Their ability to turn weakness into strength, to learn and adapt, to find ways around problems they couldn't overcome with pure force. That evening, as the sun set over the arena, a young Kyraxian warrior named Zilla secretly watched recordings of the human matches. She found herself copying their movements, trying to understand their way of thinking. She wasn't alone. Across the warrior quarters, others were doing the same. What are you doing? Her squad leader demanded, catching her mid-practice. Zilla stood straight, unashamed. Learning, Commander. Isn't that what warriors should do? The squad leader opened her mouth to object, then closed it again. She had seen today's matches, had seen tradition and power fail against innovation and technique. After a long moment, she simply nodded and walked away. Change was coming to Caraxis, whether they wanted it or not. The fifth day of the tournament brought unexpected chaos to the Caraxian capital. In the early morning hours, High Commander Azara received an urgent message from the Warrior Academy's headmaster. You must come see this, the headmaster said, her voice shaking with anger. When Azara arrived at the Academy's training grounds, she stopped in shock. Dozens of young warriors were practicing in pairs, but not in the traditional Caraxian style. They were copying human techniques, using leverage and momentum instead of raw strength. This is spreading through all the academies, the headmaster growled. They're abandoning our ancient ways for this. Among the practicing warriors was Zila, who had become something of a leader among the younger generation. She moved with grace unusual for a Caraxian, teaching others how to use an opponent's weight against them. Stop this at once, the headmaster shouted. But Zella stood her ground. Why should we stop learning? The humans have won every match so far. Their techniques work. They win through trickery. An older warrior spat. They win through skill, Zella countered. Are we warriors or just brutes who rely only on strength? The argument spread through the capital like wildfire. Young warriors began openly practicing human techniques in public spaces. Older warriors watched with disapproval, but couldn't deny the results they'd seen in the arena. Meanwhile, the human team was facing their own challenges. In their medical bay, Dr. Helen Park examined Martinez's bruised ribs. The cumulative damage is getting worse, she said, concern in her voice. Their lightest hit is like being struck by a car. Captain Chen watched from nearby, her own body covered in purple bruises. We knew this would happen. It's not just about winning matches now. We're changing their whole society. Some of them want to change, Martine said, wincing as Dr. Park applied healing gel. Did you see the young ones watching our practice session? They were taking notes. Just then, there was a knock at their door. To everyone's surprise, Zella stood there with several young warriors. We wish to learn, Zilla said hesitantly. If you will teach us. Chen looked at her team, then back at the Caraxians. This wasn't part of their mission, but... Come in, she said. Let's start with the basics. Word of this meeting reached High Commander Azara within hours. She sat on her throne, watching surveillance footage of humans teaching young Caraxians their techniques. Half of her advisors wanted the humans expelled immediately. The other half argued this could make their warriors even stronger. The old ways are failing, one younger advisor dared to say. Perhaps it's time for us to evolve. Outside the palace, crowds gathered in the streets. Some called for the tournament to be stopped, claiming it was destroying their culture. Others defended the changes, saying the Caraxians had become stagnant in their traditions. That evening, Chen watched the sun set over the alien city from her window. "We came here to win a tournament," she said to Martinez. "Instead, we might start a revolution." Martinez nodded, still holding his side. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't won in the arena. In her private chambers, High Commander Azara reviewed the day's events. Change was spreading through her society like a wildfire, and she wasn't sure whether to fight it or embrace it. Tomorrow's matches would be crucial, not just for the tournament, but for the future of her entire civilization. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Even the orbital platforms above Caraxus were full of warriors watching through massive view screens. Everyone knew today was different. Today, High Commander Azara herself would enter the ring. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the preparation room, wrapping her hands carefully. Her team surrounded her, concern visible on their faces. "You don't have to do this," Martine said softly. "We've already won enough matches to prove our point." Chen shook her head. "She challenged me personally. If I refuse, they'll say humans are cowards." She winced as she stretched her still bruised shoulders. Besides, this was always going to end with her and me. Dr. Park finished applying the last of their remaining healing gel to Chen's previous injuries. "Your body's already stressed from earlier matches. One solid hit from her could kill me." "I know." Chen stood up straight. "But sometimes you have to risk everything to change everything." The arena horn sounded. It was time. High Commander Azara waited in the ring, her ceremonial armor gleaming. She had removed the power assists and extra plating. This would be pure warrior against warrior. At 8 feet tall, she towered over Chen as the human captain entered the arena. "You have caused much trouble in my world, little human." Azara's voice boomed across the stadium. "Today, we end this." Chen took her fighting stance. "Today, we begin something new." The horn blared. Azara moved with shocking speed for someone her size, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her first punch could have shattered concrete, but Chen wasn't there anymore. She flowed around the strike like water, just as Martinez had taught her. But Azara wasn't like the other warriors. She adapted quickly, changing her style mid-attack. When Chen tried to use her momentum against her, Azara was ready. A glancing blow caught Chen's shoulder, sending her spinning across the ring. The human captain rolled to her feet, ignoring the explosion of pain. She could tell her collarbone was cracked. But now she had confirmed something. Azara had been studying their techniques too. The fight continued, becoming something neither human nor Caraxian. Chen used every style she knew: Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, Wing Chun, while Azara mixed traditional Caraxian power moves with what she'd learned from watching the humans. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Neither warrior would back down. Chen's body was screaming in pain, but she kept moving. Azara's purple skin was dark with exhaustion, but she wouldn't stop. Finally, they both struck at the same time. Chen's precision strike hit a nerve cluster under Azara's arm, while Azara's massive fist caught Chen's ribs. Both warriors crashed to the ground. The arena went silent as neither fighter got up immediately. Chen tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't respond. Azara pushed herself to her knees but couldn't go further. Their eyes met across the ring. Both saw the same thing in each other: respect. "I cannot continue," Azara said, her voice carrying in the silence. "Neither can I," Chen managed through gritted teeth. For the first time in the history of Caraxus, a match ended in a draw. Medical teams rushed in for both warriors as the crowd sat in stunned silence. No one knew how to react. There had never been a draw in ritual combat before. The law didn't even address this possibility. As they carried Chen out on a stretcher, she heard Azara speak again. Perhaps there is more than one kind of strength. The words echoed through the arena and through Kyraxian society. Nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days after the historic draw, Captain Chen woke up in the medical bay. Her body was wrapped in healing bandages, and the advanced Kyraxian medical technology hummed softly around her. To her surprise, High Commander Azara sat beside her bed, also showing signs of their battle. "You have been unconscious for 3 days," Azara said, her voice softer than usual. "Your doctor said you had 4 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and internal bruising." Chen tried to sit up but thought better of it. "Your people's medical technology is impressive. I should be in much worse shape." "Yes." Azara looked down at her own healing arm. "We have always been good at fixing what we break. Perhaps too good. It made us careless about the breaking part." Outside the medical bay's windows, they could see groups of young Kyraxian warriors practicing in the courtyard. Some used traditional power moves, while others worked on human-style techniques. Most interesting were the ones mixing both styles together. "Your people have changed us," Azara continued. "In just 1 week, you have shaken beliefs we held for 10,000 years." "Change isn't always bad," Chen replied. "Look at them. They're becoming stronger by being more flexible." Azara nodded slowly. "The Council of Elders met yesterday. There was much shouting." A small smile crossed her face. "In the end, I made a decision that will change our society forever." She stood up, towering over Chen's bed, but no longer in an intimidating way. "Humanity has proven itself not just our equal, but in some ways our superior. You showed us that true strength comes in many forms, that wisdom and adaptation can overcome raw power." "What happens now?" Chen asked. "Now?" Azara's eyes gleamed. "Now we learn from each other. The Council has voted to establish joint training programs. Your martial arts will be taught alongside our traditional combat forms. Those who master both ways will become our new elite warriors." Just then, Martinez appeared at the door with several young Kyraxian warriors, including Zila. They had clearly been practicing together, all showing signs of exertion. "Commander," Zila said, standing straight, "we would like to show you what we've learned." Azara gestured for them to continue. The group moved to the center of the medical bay's large room. What followed was a beautiful demonstration of flowing movements that combined Kyraxian power with human precision. Even injured, Chen could appreciate the effectiveness of the hybrid style. "This is just the beginning," Martine said, watching proudly. "Imagine what we could achieve together." Azara turned back to Chen. "Your mission was to prove humanity's worth. You did more than that. You showed us our own worth wasn't what we thought it was." She extended her massive hand. "The Valkyrie Coalition would be honored to form a true alliance with Earth." Chen took the offered hand carefully. Earth would be honored to accept. Later that evening, as news of the alliance spread across Kyraxian space, Zilla sat with a group of warriors from both species. They were sharing stories, comparing techniques, and planning new training methods. "Do you think the other alien races will accept this change?" one young Kyraxian asked. Martinez smiled. "They'll have to. Because together, we're going to show the galaxy what real strength looks like." In her private chambers, High Commander Azara watched recordings of the tournament matches again. But this time, she wasn't looking for weaknesses to exploit. She was looking for lessons to learn. The age of pure strength was over. The age of wisdom had begun. 1 month after the historic tournament, the skyline of Kyraxis had changed. Next to the ancient warrior academy stood a new building, the Joint Combat Training Center. Its architecture blended Earth's elegant simplicity with Kyraxian power, much like the fighting styles now taught within its walls. Captain Chen, finally fully healed, stood beside High Commander Azara as they watched the first class of mixed-species students train. Humans moved alongside Kyraxians, each learning from the other's strengths. "Your Martinez is an excellent teacher," Azara commented, watching him guide a young Kyraxian through a complex dance-like movement. "Who would have thought a dancer could teach warriors so much? And Zilla has a gift for combining both styles," Chen replied, nodding toward where the young Kyraxian warrior was teaching humans how to enhance their techniques with controlled power moves. The training center had become famous across the sector. Other alien species, once fearful of the Kyraxians, now sent observers to learn. In one corner, a group of tall, thin Andarians watched with their 4 eyes wide in amazement as human and Kyraxian students demonstrated joint techniques. "The Centauri Empire has requested to join our alliance," Azara said, her voice proud but humble. "They say any civilization that can turn enemies into partners so quickly must be worth following." Chen smiled. "How times change. A month ago, they wouldn't even answer our messages." Just then, Martinez called everyone to gather around. Today was graduation day for the first class of joint-trained warriors. 20 humans and 20 Kyraxians stood in formation, their postures showing both strength and grace. "These warriors represent our future," Martinez announced. "They are neither human nor Kyraxian in their fighting style. They are something new, something better." To demonstrate, the graduates paired up, one human with one Kyraxian. They performed a combat demonstration that left everyone speechless. Humans used leverage and skill to redirect Kyraxian power, while Kyraxians showed unexpected agility and precision. Together, they moved like a perfect machine. "Beautiful," Azara whispered. "Simply beautiful." After the ceremony, Chen found Zella training alone in one of the practice rooms. The young Kyraxian had become a symbol of the new generation. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Chen asked. Zilla nodded. "I was remembering how we used to mock your size, your lack of strength. We were so foolish." She demonstrated a human technique perfectly. "True strength comes in many forms." "That's becoming a popular saying around here," Chen smiled. "Because it's true." Zilla stood straight. "I've been chosen to lead the next training group. We're getting students from 3 more alien species next month." Word of the transformation on Kyraxis had spread far across the galaxy. The Valkyrie Coalition, once feared as brutal warriors, was becoming known as a center of learning and growth. Their reputation for strength remained, but now it was tempered with wisdom. That evening, High Commander Azara and Captain Chen stood on the highest tower of the training center, watching the twin suns set. "When I sent that challenge to Earth," Azara said, "I thought we would either crush you or be disappointed. Instead, you taught us that victory sometimes means letting go of your old ideas about winning. And you taught us that strength isn't something to fear, but to understand," Chen replied. "Together, we're stronger than either of us could be alone." Below them, in the growing darkness, lights came on in the training center. The night shift was beginning. Warriors of different species learning, growing, and changing together. The future had arrived, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. Earth and Kyraxis had not just made peace or formed an alliance. They had created something entirely new, a future where different kinds of strength worked together, making the galaxy a better place for everyone.